I'll tell you something. When I was in Tampa, Coach Dungy was such a force in that town, and I'll never forget, and I've brought this up with him before. John Lynch is a dear friend of mine, and I said to him, I go, you guys were 0-8. You were buying into what Coach Dungy was saying? He goes, he kept walking in every day going like this. Look, we got a core group of guys here. Rondé, you, Sapp, Allstott. They had a group, and then they started filling in with free agency. Coach Dungy brought a coaching staff that everyone in the building bought in. I was there. I watched it. And John was like, he just kept pounding away and believing. I think that's what Andy Reid is doing in Kansas City. Can you imagine getting rid of Tyreek Hill and you win the Super Bowl? You got to have trust in your coach. Let's bring in the Hall of Fame coach, Tony Dungy here. Coach, how you doing? Thank you so much for coming aboard.
Hey, Dan, I'm doing great, and I totally agree with you. I've known Andy Reid a long time. I worked 3 years in the Chiefs organization. I still have a lot of friends there. We broadcast their game, their divisional round game against Jacksonville. I had a chance to be in the locker room afterwards, and you could see it, and you could feel it. These men believe in Andy and what he's doing, and that, whether they're 10 down in the Super Bowl or 24 down like they were to Houston a couple of years ago, it doesn't matter. They believe.
Coach, is that right? When I brought this up a couple minutes ago, I go, I think this whole process started early in the Patrick Mahomes relationship with Andy, is that they were so transparent when they had Alex Smith. They made everybody privy of what was going on. Now, look, I'm not saying Mahomes has any say, but he might have some input. They may keep him abreast. It just seems that there's an open dialogue. And so when you come to a player like Mahomes, hey, look, I may be giving up one of the greatest deep threats in the history of the league because we've got to keep Orlando Brown. And it's a salary cap. It's important. Do you think, Coach, that he's he has better relationships? Can you learn from did you learn from Tampa that made you a better coach in Indianapolis?
Absolutely. But it really comes from that honesty and that being straightforward with people. We had that conversation with our whole team before our Super Bowl in 2006. Edgerrin James was a free agent. And Bill Polian came to me and said, we could re-sign Edgerrin at the market rate. It's going to take $7 or $8 million. But if we do that, we're going to lose Reggie Wayne, Dwight Freeney, and Dallas Clark down the road. I can just tell you that. So I had to go to our team and say, hey, look, Edgerrin is a huge part of this. And coming back after knee surgery and all the things he's done for this organization. But for us to win in the long term, we have to do this. We're going to draft a rookie. We don't know who it's going to be, but we'll get you a good player. And unfortunately, the whole picture, we've got to do that. And I'm sure Andy went to those guys and said, you know what? We could re-sign Tyreek and it would be worth it. But how long are we going to be able to stay competitive? So you know what? Have confidence in our personnel department and our drafting room and everything, and we're going to find you some good players. So they end up making the trade, getting those high picks. Okay, we'll draft Sky Moore. We'll go out and trade for Kadarius Toney, and we're going to draft some defensive players. And you know what? We're going to be okay, and the players believe that.
Coach, Super Bowl 57, I'd love to get your take. We're based in Philly, and I said, look, it was a great roster playing against a great coach and a great quarterback. And it took, I think, that quarterback to beat that roster. Just your takeaways from Super Bowl 57.
Well, I thought Philadelphia may have had the more complete team. I thought Kansas City was battle tested. I thought the difference might be the fact that Kansas City's coaching staff had been there before, that a lot of their players had been in the Super Bowl 2 out of the last 3 years, and that experience might come forward. It was a tremendous game, and you saw two offenses playing at a very, very high level. Philadelphia's got a great defense. Kansas City has a good defense, and both of those were pretty much helpless against those offenses. And it was a play here, a play there, the fumble by Hurts, a play like that turned things around. But there was two tremendous offensive performances.
Coach, tell me I'm wrong here, and I threw this out. And you tell me if you think you can win. And I know the NFL is going into a transition now with these dual threat guys. Coach, it's not that I'm against paying Hurts $45 million or $50 million a year. I'm against paying a guy who's dual threat, who's going to get hurt. RG3, K1, Lamar Jackson, even a guy like Jalen, Coach, who's missed like the last 2 years. He's missed some games, especially some significant games this year down the stretch. I mean, Coach, can you win a Super Bowl and build a team around a guy who's a dual threat guy?
You can, but you just mentioned it. You're taking a risk, and you talked about all of those guys. Jalen Hurts is as big and as strong and as physical as any quarterback you're going to see. But if you put your body in that type of risk that often, things are going to happen. And we have seen it happen to Lamar Jackson. We saw it happen to Jalen this year. Is it just the luck of the draw and the shoulder injury and you miss a little time? Is that going to manifest itself down the road? I really think that is what Baltimore is going through with Lamar Jackson right now. They know how valuable he is to the team. They know what he means. Can we afford to shell out that guaranteed money and put our
See if we can reconnect here with Coach. Here he is right here. Yeah, go ahead, Coach. Finish up.
Yeah, not that they don't think Lamar is worth it. Not that they don't think he's that great a talent. He is. But can we put ourselves in that situation? Is it fair to the rest of the team, salary cap wise? That's the question.
Coach, the Eagles now are going through replacing coordinators now, and free agency's right around the corner. Hell, you got the combines next week. Would you want to get your coordinators in place first before you started deciding on what kind of roster you were going to come back with? Or do you look at first signing Hurts and then getting into free agent, and then you get the coordinators? How would you go about it with Bill Polian?
No, you want to get your coordinators in place. And Nick Sirianni, he may not have thought it was going to happen this fast, but when you are a playoff team, you're going to have people poaching your coordinators. It's going to happen. They're going to move on. Your assistant coaches. So you've always got to have that thought in the back of your mind. If I lose Dan, what am I going to do? Who is my next in line? And so you think about that, and you have those ready to go. I believe they do, but you definitely want to get that in place so then you can move forward.
Coach, I want to ask you a personal question about your exit on Tampa. You don't have to answer this, but was it over Clyde Christensen?
No, it was not. It was we went
because I know you were so loyal to your staff, and it just because I was covering you and I'm like, why did it shouldn't have went out that way. We all hated it.
No, here's what happened, Dan. When I got there, we had 13 straight losing seasons. And our ownership, the Glazers, said, if you can just get us respectable, that would be great. That's what we're looking for. And I said, hey, we're going to be good every year. We're not going to mortgage the future. We're not going to try to rush. You mentioned we lost our first 8 games. We're building slowly. Well, now we start to win, and we're in the playoffs, and we go to the NFC Championship game, and it's just like, okay, well, we need to do something. We can't get over the hump. And I said, hey, we are in it for the long run. And we had some disagreements about how that should be done, okay? And so I think the Glazers just said, hey, we would rather go all in and try to win. We're going to go for Bill Parcells or John Gruden because this patient philosophy is not necessarily what we want. So they did, and they won the Super Bowl the next year. But I think my track record in going to the playoffs 10 or 11 years in a row and just being there all the time, that's what I wanted to do. And we just had a little disagreement about how we should approach things.
Coach, I'll tell you this, in that NFC title game against the Rams, I must have almost dropped 15 F-bombs that next morning because I'm like, if that was a catch. And I will say this to this day, the greatest show on turf. What did you guys hold them to? You guys held them to 14 points or something? Wasn't it like that, Coach?
11 points. Ricky Prohl made a great catch in the corner. Brian Kelly missed the ball by 2 inches. And to this day, all of our players feel like we should have won that game 6-5, that we should have held the greatest show on turf to 5 points. But we didn't. We had to play in the end, the Bert Emanuel play you're referencing. 100 times out of 100, that was a catch. After that game, they had to pass a rule and restate it and say that it really was a catch, and from now on, it's going to be a catch.
Oh,
So it was one of those frustrating moments, but we were close, and we just didn't quite get it done that particular day.
two last questions for you, Coach. I want to ask you about Eric Bieniemy. I want to ask you about, when I see, and no disrespect to Shane Steichen and no disrespect to Jonathan Gannon, but how are those guys more qualified than Eric Bieniemy? And I don't care what Eric Bieniemy as a player coach. I tell you what, I wouldn't like anybody to know what I did at Miami because I'm a different man today, having a wife and kids. So you know what I mean? I'm a whole different guy. And if he's good enough to be with Andy Reid all these years, I think he's good enough to be a head coach. And my problem is, and again, I have no shade on Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, but how do those guys get elevated? And Eric has almost got to take a lateral move to prove himself again. Just your take on it.
It's really sad to me that Eric Bieniemy feels like I've got to leave a Super Bowl team and go to a team that hasn't won in a long time just to show people that I know what I'm doing. Doug Peterson didn't have to go somewhere and call plays to show people that he knew what he was doing. Matt Nagy didn't have to go somewhere to call plays to show people what he was doing. Nick Sirianni was Frank Reich's assistant in Indianapolis. Frank Reich called the plays. Nick Sirianni did not call the plays. Nick Sirianni didn't have to leave Frank Reich to prove that he knew what he was doing. People looked at that and said, you know what? He's working for a good man. I interviewed him. He's great. I'm going to take a chance on him. That should have happened for Eric Bieniemy quite a while ago. It hasn't. I regret that he has to make this move, but I guess that's what he feels like he has to do.
Coach, I think just one extension on that. I don't really think it's about African Americans getting head football coaching jobs. I think it's about the assistants, Coach. There has to be more there on the coordinator positions for African Americans so they can elevate into that position, because what we just talked about, I mean, if you have more assistants, there's more of a pool to pick from. And it just seems that the Rooney Rule doesn't really apply to the assistant jobs, but that's where those head coaching jobs come from.
Well, they should, and they do, and for the most part. And the problem comes in when it doesn't play out for African Americans. When Andy Reid is working for Mike Holmgren, and Mike Holmgren runs the ship, he got Mike. Well, even go before that, Mike Holmgren is working for Bill Walsh.
Right.
Bill Walsh is calling the plays. Bill Walsh runs the offense. But people say, oh, my gosh, Mike Holmgren has been under Bill Walsh for so long. He must be very, very good. And Walsh has confidence in him. So the Green Bay Packers hire Mike Holmgren. Mike sets up the system the same way. Steve Mariucci works for him. He moves on to become a head coach. Andy Reid works for him. He moves on to be a head coach. Now Sherman Lewis takes Andy Reid's spot. Oh, Sherman Lewis doesn't call the plays. We can't hire him. And you say, wait a minute. Now that was 30 years ago. So now fast forwards, Andy Reid is now the head man. And gosh, Doug Peterson works for him. Doug Peterson is sharp. He's worked for Andy. We're going to hire him. Matt Nagy takes his spot. Matt Nagy must be sharp. And Andy Reid has confidence in him. We're going to hire him. Now Eric Bieniemy takes over for Matt Nagy. Oh, Eric Bieniemy doesn't call the plays. This is probably Andy Reid's system. Well, it's been Andy Reid's system for 15 years. And so that can't be the issue, but apparently it is with Eric.
Okay, finally here, Coach. Sapp, Brooks, congratulations, Rondé Barber. One of your guys makes it into the Hall of Fame. Lynch, Allstott. Throw Simeon Rice's butt in there too. Who's your favorite Buck? You know, I have ties to the Bucks. I'm a Buccaneer. So who's your favorite Buck?
All of those guys.
No way.
But I'm my favorite and tell you why. Warrick Dunn came to us in 1997. Warrick Dunn became the NFC Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, while he was putting 3 of his teenage siblings through high school. He was getting housing for single moms in the Tampa area. He was doing so much besides being a great player. And with all that was going on with his family and what he did, he was just very special in my heart. Not that he was a better player than those guys, but he brought something special.
And Coach, he's still doing that to this
Still,
day because of what happened with his mom, I believe,
yeah.
from Louisiana. And I got to tell you, Coach, work done. Isn't it funny? Sometimes just like Tim Duncan's of the world, because they're quiet, unassuming, and yet impactful, we forget the really great ones. And you talk about incredible character. Work done is a prime example, I think, of the kind of guy that you liked coaching when you were in Indianapolis, also in Tampa, and Minnesota too, I would throw in there. Coach, thank you so much for your time. It's always an honor to have you on. And God, and you're so kind to me, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Coach. By the way, your foundation, I saw you guys doing some stuff. If you want to throw something out so people can go there.
Well, we have a Dungy Family Foundation. We work here in Tampa. We read to elementary school kids. We try to get education emphasized. So that's been great. All Pro Dad is another organization that we work with, helping men become better fathers. Go to the All Pro Dad website. It's awesome, especially if you're a man and you want to have a better connection with your kids. That's a great place to go.
I get that text every day from Derek Brooks, being a better man. He goes, Coach does it to me all the time, so I'm doing it to you. I get a text going like this. Look, I get this text. He goes, are you being a better man today? Yes, I told my daughter I loved her. He goes, it's all you need. It's just to tell her you love her every day. Thank you, Coach, for your impact and influence on all of us. I appreciate it. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Dan. Always great to be with you.
You bet. The legendary Tony Dungy, better man than coach. And he was a hell of a coach. That's for dang sure. Please hit the like button.